Hello, good evening. This is Angela Bennett of Advice Resolutions reporting outside 87 Castle Road, Northolt, Ealing. We're filming today outside this accommodation which was actually lived in by Mr Errol Baptiste. You'll see at the top window on the right hand side of the building was where Mr Errol Baptiste spent 23 years in a 3.88 metre square room. Errol, tell us, please, importantly, when you first took the room at 87 Castle Road, what was your first impressions of the room?
Because I did have no idea, because the landlord gave misleading information. He claimed that the room was 6.51.
Okay.
He was given this misleading information, disparity. He never mentioned the true size of the room.
When you were renting the room, did you make a complaint to the landlord about the size of the room?
And I was aware of the room itself. I mentioned about the disrepair.
So you were aware of the room's disrepair,
Yeah.
and what was the disrepair in the room at the time?
The room was not decorated, no decoration.
What would you describe the walls as when you were living there?
The wallpaper had been painted, no decoration.
For the whole 23 years?
Yes, exactly.
And was there any structural damage in the room?
Damp from both rooms, from the larger room to the other room. Both the upper floor had damp.
What colour was the damp?
It was black and mouldy.
Okay, and did you report that to the landlord?
Yes.
What did he do about it?
He refused to do anything about it.
Can you describe the other rooms in the house and the hallway? What are the state of those areas of the property?
Because the room next door had damp as well, and because that led to the inspection later.
What was the inside corridors and the other rooms like in the house?
And because the other room, they had central heating in the room.
And just your room didn't have any heating at all?
No, zero.
What was the corridor like? What was the bathroom and toilet room like?
It was dilapidated.
In what way was the toilet dilapidated?
Bad condition, everything.
What did the toilet look like? Why it was dilapidated?
It was dilapidated. The toilet flush thing wasn't working.
What about the bath?
Bathroom wasn't working.
What was wrong with the bath?
The boiler wasn't working. It was rusty.
Okay, and what was wrong with the stairway? Was that okay?
Nope. The stairways had no carpet, no line, or...
For 23 years?
Yeah. Zero.
So what was it like walking around on the flooring without carpet?
Because the floor was very bumpy. It could collapse at any time.
And did you report all this disrepair to the landlord?
It was a joint effort from each tenant, and the landlord refused to do anything.
What was the kitchen like? Was that in disrepair?
The kitchen wallpaper was peeling off. It was collapsing.
It was collapsing. My goodness, that's really bad. And what about the kitchen units? What were they like?
There was no door in the kitchen area.
And what were the kitchen units like and the kitchen worktops?
Very poor condition.
What did they look like?
Rusty.
Rusty?
Yes.
And did you feel that it was cleanliness in the kitchen?
Zero.
Did you feel uncomfortable cooking in the kitchen?
Yes. Because every tenant and myself, we put in a joint complaint.
You put in a joint complaint?
Yes.
And nothing happened, or?
The landlord refused to do anything until the inspection that led to the inspection.
And who did you go to get help to start this situation going in the right direction?
I went to a vice resolution, and then a vice resolution on the client behalf wrote to the chief executive and the environmental health regulatory officer came.
Which borough is this?
Ealing Council.
And what happened when Angela Bennett of Advice Resolutions wrote to the Ealing Borough Council?
And they received a referral by the chief executive.
And what happened after the referral?
The chief executive sent the inspector.
And what did he do?
He inspected the premises.
What day was this?
October the 29th, 3 years ago.
And who did he speak to?
Mr Mahmood came, and around 11 o'clock in the morning, it was more than 45-minute interval.
Who did he speak to?
He spoke to the landlord, Mr Watson.
And who else did he speak to?
He spoke to the 4 tenants.
The 4 tenants in the house at the time?
Yes, including me.
Were they men, women, or all men?
All men.
All men, all single men living in the property at the time?
Yeah.
Okay. So what happened? What that led to you moving out of the room?
Because due to the fact the inspection from Mr. Mahmood, he interviewed me. He found that the room was illegal.
Why was it illegal?
It measured 3.88. He had a digital tape measure. He measured everything.
And he discovered, Mr. Mahmood of the London Borough of Ealing discovered the room was so small it shouldn't have been let.
Yes.
What documentation was prepared to prove that fact?
Due to the fact, Alison Ford wrote a letter at the time. The then regulatory officer wrote a letter.
Was she senior or was she junior?
She was senior.
So she was one step ahead of Mr. Mahmood. She was his manager.
Yeah.
And what documentation was served on the premises?
It talked about prohibition notice.
A prohibition notice. Is that considered quite serious?
Yes.
In what way? What does it cause to happen?
Yeah, because the landlord breached the Housing Act of 2004 and he breached the Human Habitation Act 2018.
That's interesting, that.
And there's another thing, he breached the Housing and Planning Act of 2016.
That's very interesting, and obviously you're quite versed on what was going on. Particularly, you talked about advice resolutions helping you.
Yes.
So when you were given this notice, what did you think about all that time you'd spent in the house and you didn't know it was a legal room? What did you think?
Because due to the fact the landlord gave misleading information trying to claim the room was 6.51. However, Mr. Mahmood, with the real documentation of reading the measurement, 3.88.
But how did you feel, the fact that you spent all that time in the room and paid all that rent?
Yeah, because the landlord was cheating. The landlord claimed he had an HMO license.
You paid all that rent, so what was your view on how much money you'd spent on all those years?
Yeah, the landlord cheated me out. He didn't have no HMO license.
That's just terrible. So what is your view on anyone considering renting properties in the future?
And first, they need to seek advice from a very good from advice resolution, any organisation. I'm talking about rehousing. Second step, they need to make sure that the council must inspect the landlord every 3 months, and because the landlord must have an HMO license.
Okay, that's quite powerful advice that you're giving, that, the landlord should be, checked, and the property should be, I believe, what I'm understanding, inspected.
Yeah.
So do you think that, people will benefit from getting the right housing advice at the right time?
Yes, I'll talk about inspection every 3 months, make sure the landlord is accredited.
Accredited?
Yeah,
okay.
Accreditation.
Yeah. And what would your advice be to local authorities before they allow a landlord to let a property?
Due to the fact, in other words, the landlord must meet the criteria.
How can that be proved?
He must provide documentation of his certification.
Okay, and do you think the council should visually inspect properties before they're let?
Yes.
Oh, that's perfect advice. And again, lastly, what would your advice be to people looking for accommodation to rent in the private sector?
You have to make sure the landlord must be accredited, and the landlord must provide proof of certificate he's been accredited. He must be a fit and proper landlord.
Right. Well, I'm very proud to have met you, Mr. Baptiste. It's been a pleasure, and understanding the grief that you'd gone through for 23 years.
It was abuse.
And you've come out at the other end to tell your story, albeit it was a harrowing experience.
Yeah, because that room up there, 3.88, it was abused by the criminal landlord.
The criminal landlord?
Yes.
Okay.
Because with the landlord himself, he was like a Donald J. Trump.
What happened with all the other tenants? What was the resultant effect?
All of them moved out because the landlord had more than... Due to the fact the landlord had more than 5 people, he had 6 people.
6 people in the house?
Yes.
And they all moved out?
Yes.
As a result of Advice Resolution's discovery through advising the local authority Ealing what was going on?
Yes.
Okay.
No HMO license.
No HMO license. So, anyway, this has been a very interesting discussion with you, and I think the moral of the story is, one, if you are going to rent a property in the private sector, you need to do a lot of background research, do a lot of investigation, make sure that the property is fit to let, the landlord is accredited, and the landlord's property has been properly, thoroughly inspected.
And Finally, certification. The landlord must provide evidence of his certificates.
And also, if you do have any problems with housing, seek advice at the right time with a reputable organisation. This is Angela Bennett, Advice Resolutions, signing out, and have a very good evening. Thank you for listening.